It's time again for the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast with Dr. John Dentico. The mission of our podcast is to provide 21st century leadership training for a talent-driven world. We help organizations implement strategies and practices designed to attract, hire, engage, and retain top talent while mitigating the effects of burnout. Our guests are experts in various fields of organizational dynamics, including, but not limited to, leadership, management, communication, and coaching. They bring a world of knowledge and solutions to our viewers and listeners. I am sincerely grateful for their participation and ideas. So let's dive in. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Rachel Anderson. With more than 15 years of experience, Rachel Anderson is a fractional chief marketing officer, keynote speaker, leadership coach, and owner of Pivot Studios. As a fractional CMO, she helps organizations get clarity and confidence with their marketing strategies and organizational goals as they handle hypergrowth. She has worked with various businesses globally, from government agencies to Fortune 500 companies to startups. She also partners with leaders to create human-centric teams that deliver big results. From speeches to workshops, courses, and more, Rachel is passionate about giving leaders the tools they need to take a human-first approach as they grow revenue and retain incredible people. Her first book, about the keys to human-centric leadership, will be published in late 2024. I am very pleased to have her here with me today on the podcast. Hello, Rachel. How are you this day?
I'm doing great, and I'm very glad to be here, John.
Oh, very glad to have you. By the way, let me ask you, if I don't know if you have this yet, what is the title of your book?
You know what? It is under deep consideration right now. It's Gaining the Keys to Human-Centric Leadership, but we'll see if it stays. There's a couple different options that have been floating around.
I know the process. Titles have got to grab you, and they've got to really succinctly, as you well know, capture what's going to go on in the book. So I appreciate that. Let me ask you this question. We'll dive right in. Can you explain what a fractional CMO is? And how do you interact with the organization as a whole?
That's a great question. So, a fractional CMO is someone who comes in with a executive level understanding and ability to help you with your marketing endeavors. So, for any business, if they have a CMO, a chief marketing officer, a fractional is essentially a part-time consultant. And the great thing about fractional work in general is that it can really help businesses save costs if that's something that they're looking at, but even more than that is provide us tailored expertise in a particular area of marketing for a period of time. And sometimes that's a 3-month project or something that you need a consultation on for getting into a new industry or validating some plans that maybe you've created. Or it could be for a few years while you grow into really needing a full time person. But they're incredible to be able to really provide a hyper tailored expertise. So for me and my business, we really do 3 things. We look at marketing strategies, we do organizational alignment, and process improvements, because those are the 3 key areas where if you look at your marketing from a larger strategy, you see the most impact really fast. So those are our sweet areas of expertise. And then we get to work with lots of different kinds of companies.
Great. That's a
Yeah.
great explanation. I want to ask you this question because I've been really dealing with it with a company I'm working with right now. And I think it will lead us to the human-centric portion of it, okay? How important is it for a company to have a mission statement? Okay. Not something, as you and I both know, they just hang on the wall, but something they live by every day. And from where you stand, what should that mission statement contain?
A mission statement can be really critical. And there's a couple different reasons why I think that's true. First is that if a company doesn't have a mission statement, I would question if their leaders truly know the direction they want to take the company. I don't necessarily think that mission statement has to be all pervasive or always true, but I think it can be true for that exact moment of time. And without that, where's that proverbial North Star? Where is the rallying cry? Where is the alignment of expectations across your entire organization? And so that's really the first thing. I think the second is that it causes leaders to really narrow in to where they want growth to happen and what way or what path they want to take in order to see that growth happen. And so, are you going to prioritize the customer in your path of growth? In which case, that is likely going to be part of your mission statement. Do you want to prioritize your employees? Do you want to prioritize a industry or a way of doing something? And so, I think that really starts to shape your culture. And that's a whole different part of why I think mission statements can be really valuable for companies of truly any size.
My feeling on mission statements is they have to be one sentence. That's all you get. And it has to be so focused, so targeted that everybody gets it. They live it, they
Mhm.
breathe it, they work it every day. And to your point, it's when many times when people create or organizations create mission statements, they think they're creating it for the people external to their organization. In other words, oh, we want everybody to
Mhm.
know who we are. Aren't we great? Look at our mission statement. And what they forget is the mission statement is really about the people inside the organization.
Mhm.
What is our galvanizing theme? What is it that we live and breathe every day? So I absolutely agree with you. And I'll be honest with you. For a number of years, I shied away, personally speaking, from talking about mission statements because it was this hang it on the wall. People walk by it every day. It may be 4 to 5 paragraphs long. And who pays attention to stuff like that? No, it's got to be focused. It's got to be targeted. And I really made this recent connection, and that is how important it is to
Mhm.
branding a company. So why don't you I wonder if you have any reflections on that, the mission statement as it relates to branding.
Yeah, and actually want to comment on something you said too, because I think that's really important. So brevity. I've been part of several companies that have created their mission statements, or part of the teams that are helping them create the mission statements. And I can't tell you how many times you finish doing it, and it reads like AI just spit out a hypothetical statement to you based on a bunch of keywords because there's too many chefs in the kitchen trying to make it all encompassing of all the things that you want. And so I think connecting that to branding, it's really important. Like the more simple it is, the more likely you're going to be able to have people remember it, believe it, and do it. It's really just that. And so that translates then into all activities that you do. If your company's a brand, or a mission statement, I'm going to say hypothetically, is be confident for the customer, hypothetically. Then as you look at, okay, then what is our brand? It should be about confidence. So you're going to use bold colors and you're going to use research and data as you put content together. You're going to have bold statements of confidence and clarity so that the customer sees that reflected as part of how you put yourself forward. And so those things really are a little intertwined, and the mission statement should be the fabric that the rest of your brand, your company, your culture is really built from.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, the term I use in this in to connect to the statement you made about we just got all these different things that are in there. I call them
Yeah.
roulette wheel mission statements. And you've seen a roulette wheel, it's got all the numbers on there. They spin the wheel, they throw the little ball around the other way, and where it drops into the number, you get paid 35 to 1. Not bad if it comes up.
Right.
But
Sure.
too often, people, if you think about the table next to the roulette wheel with all the numbers on it, right? People come up and they want to put money on every number.
Mhm.
So let's just, yeah, I'm going to win. I covered all the bets. Yeah, but you're going to lose a heck of a lot of money because the money it took to you fill in the other blanks or to cover the other numbers, if you will, is just overwhelming. And yet there are people today who just they can't get away from one simple statement. One of the examples I'm using today is the movie 300 with Gerard Butler.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a, so what was the Spartan slogan? Now, this is not necessarily their mission statement, they had a slogan. And the slogan was, this is Sparta. Does anybody not know who we are? Does anybody have any questions? Anybody want to go to HR? No, this is Sparta. We send children into the wilderness to fight beasts so that everybody understands we're Sparta. And it's so crystal clear, so beautiful. Now, I wouldn't call that the mission statement, but it makes the point that brevity really matters. There's a great line I remember reading many years ago. It said, oftentimes, the simplest things are the most powerful. I think it's something to consider. So let's continue down this. So now we've talked about mission statement. We talked about branding. Okay. And now and I talk a lot about the big three. Let me just talk about that for a second.
Mhm.
What are people looking for in the workplace today? There's the big three. Number one, they want values alignment. Number two is they want to be involved in the decision-making processes of the organization. And number three, they want training and learning that advances their professional career. People are no longer, after COVID, people are no longer in it, as you well know, for just a progression, if you will. Mission statement to this notion of human-centric, the idea that we're now organized around our people. So what I'd like you to do is, why don't you chat with me for a bit on the difference between, let's say, human-centric leadership contrasted with, let's call it bottom line centric leadership. Okay. And in your opinion, why is human-centric leadership so important?
Human-centric leadership is really important because it's not a replacement of a leadership type, but a focus while you employ a leadership style in order to achieve goals. So when I talk about human-centric leadership, I really define it as prioritizing the well-being and development of the individual on the path to over the organization, on the path to achievement. Using your example about COVID and how people want that alignment now, it's no longer enough. I might argue that with the rise of social media in I'd say, early 2010s, it really started to shift the mindset of generations that were able to adopt really quickly that part into their culture in how they were seeing the world. Because the information of access to information was so much faster and easier. And you're seeing things so much more widely spread into other countries and even niche parts of other countries that were previously not as reported on or seen or able to be accessed. And there was this term that started to come up in the millennial generation called the social justice generation, where all of a sudden, because these issues are being brought to the forefront, that's being prioritized as something that they care about. Now, what does this do with work? I think fast forward another decade, a decade and a half, and COVID hits. And this is the first time I think in the kind of private sector world, merging those values together suddenly became possible. No longer was it just enough to let business run per usual. There was an opportunity to say, no, people are equally as important in this process, and we're not going to stand for you to ignore it. And so I feel like it had been primed for a long time. So now, when we look at how do I, as a business leader, as an executive, regardless of size or industry, achieve this? It's no longer enough for you to just say, all I have to care about is the bottom line. All I have to care about is the revenue number and meeting that goal. Now you have to be able to also ask, how do I get there? And how do I make sure that I don't lose people in the process? Because that number is just as significant towards your revenue and your ROI as actually just making money through your traditional customer avenues or acquisitions. And so, as you look at this from a leadership perspective, there are actual financial numbers to be put behind saying prioritizing people on the path to that achievement is incredibly important and has monetary sense that can be made by doing that.
Yeah, I think I have to tell you, I'm in the boomer generation. We
Mm,
cared about people. When I was a naval officer, I cared a lot about my people. I've learned that the engine of any organization is run on trust. If you don't have
mhm.
trust, you've got nothing. It's over. Forget it. You're not no relationships, nothing. So to me, that's always been an issue. I think it's always been there. It's just been below the layer, as they say, down
Yeah.
under the covers. And I think that's important. And it's now raised up. Recognizing, and I talk about this a lot, is recognizing that every person who walks through the door is not going to be a perfect fit with your organization. There may be, there obviously are different perspectives, different ways of doing it. But I think, again, this idea of the mission statement connecting to the value statement makes the statement, if you will, about who we are as a company. You want to join us? This is what we're going to do. You may not fit here. Okay, that's fine. That's just the way it is. And, but you may very well want to be part of this. And I think that helps bring the right people to the right organizations more times than not. So I appreciate that. That was really good
Yeah.
answer.
And if I
Go ahead.
can, let's talk about generational differences for a moment, especially in context of human-centric leadership. There was this fascinating study done on which generation was considered the smartest, quote unquote, as a vague term. And what they found was that the study was broken into different like 10-year gaps. So it was basically like 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And what they found is that there's basically a crisscross where people in their 20s are the smartest at innovative thinking, like trying new things, failing fast. They have no preconceived notions of this won't work, so they'll just test and keep going. But then people in the 60s, in their 60s, were the smartest about learned behaviors. So they were able to easily assess, obviously, we should do this thing because I've been there, done that. I've seen this before. Like we just make quick decisions and we go forward and it's very successful. And so those two different kinds of smarts crisscross as you go through the different generations. And so I think that it's really important to embrace a multi generational leadership strategy because as we see now, everything's always so like this generation is the worst or this generation is the worst. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to bring incredible opportunities to the workforce to have a different way to look at work, whether it's remote or it's through automation or now we're seeing AI. And that's going to be a trickle up effect of incredible positivity to every generation that benefits all the way up from that. But then I think that the generations at the top right now, boomers and soon Gen X, they're going to bring a stability that says, listen, let's not get crazy here. Like we still have to see these goals and run things through and keep things going. And they're going to bring that balance. And from a human centric perspective, you're right. Like you always cared about, or the boomers have always cared about social needs and prioritizing individuals. I think we just get to benefit now from the different ways that we're able to find those little openings and really support each other. Because what's good for the geese is good for the gander, as they say. So one person benefits, we all benefit.
And because of social media and the process we're engaging in right now, it's become more prevalent. It's up on, everybody sees it. And it's interesting that you say this because I have to tell you that my model of leadership is not based on styles. I don't agree. I am not a styles kind of guy of leadership. Okay. My model of leadership that I started developing 30 years ago is based on one thing. And that one thing is contribution. Okay. In other words, we have a problem. We have an issue. Anybody got any ideas? Anybody want to weigh in on this? Come on. We need your help. When it comes to people in an organization, I make no preconceived notions about anybody in the room. Okay. I don't make any judgments, nothing like that. My job as a leader is to get people to say, here's the problem, common to all of us. Let us work together in unison. And then, as you say, Bring the different kinds of perspectives, the experimenters versus the people who can look at it and say, maybe we should pilot this rather than jump all over it. Let's pilot the program. Let's see where it takes us, prototype it, and test it. And those balances, we can really help each other. So I'm a very process oriented, practice oriented individual in terms of my leadership model. I believe that leadership is what people do together. And last week, I had a wonderful example of that. I was in Texas working with a company doing a strategic thinking exercise that I've created. And I had 13 people in the room, president of the company, the general manager, branch managers, project managers, administrative people, all working together, all defining what the future of their organization was going to be. And the president of the company said, yeah, this is great. I love it. Let's keep going. That kind of a thing. Certainly a wonderful guy and open to this. But the whole idea is that we can all be there and help each other, which leads me, oddly enough, to the next question. And that is this. And that is this. So, what do the different 5 generations working in the workplace, in your opinion, what is it we hear, as you say, we hear about all the differences. What is it that they share? What are common to all of them, do you think?
One of the most widely true commonality is what makes a team successful. So it doesn't matter the generation, the skill set, the type of individual, meaning are they an individual contributor, a manager, whatnot. The most we have in common, or the most thing I think that we share, is that in order for us to be successful, we need psychological safety on our teams. And so that is by far the commonality that can bring us together. Psychological safety, according to Brene Brown, has a few different pieces to it, but they're all really simple. It's things like listening, staying curious, or being honest. And this one was really interesting to me because she said one of the things is keeping confidence. And I think we overlook that one a lot, which to me just says, have you built trust on your team so that you can be vulnerable and try things? Or have you built trust so that you can have a new project come up and get real honest feedback? Even what you were talking about, John, in your leadership definition of who has the best idea, let's bring it to the table. There's not a psychological safety on that team, then they're not necessarily going to speak up if they're maybe an introvert, or maybe they're a new member, or maybe they're just the least senior member, or maybe they recently had a conflict with another member on the team and don't want to bring that into the moment. I think there's a lot of benefits to really building that, but it's outside of all of the differences that we bring to the workplace.
Number one, the number one attribute on my model is safety. People have to be safe, feel safe to say what they want to say, to be honest. You can't have the honesty, the integrity. You can't have the commitment unless people feel safe. They won't say anything. They'll just clam up and they'll say, here, you go right. I just don't feel safe. So
Yeah.
creating that safety boundary, if you will, is so very important. And again, for me, trust is transcendent. Okay.
Mhm.
It cuts across all the other values. If you don't have trust, you can't get to trust unless you have safety. And when you have safety, then you get commitment. People will commit to it. And I believe that in fact, I had a previous guest, and I can't remember her name right now, but she really did a wonderful job on pointing out the difference between trust and confidence.
Mm.
We can have confidence. It was Julie Williamson, Dr. Julie Williamson told me this. You can be, you can have trust, but do you have the confidence to do what needs to be done? We can trust people, but they're two different things. And I absolutely agree with her. She was really great. And it made me think a lot about that. People, I trust you, but can you do it? And what do we have to do to help you prepare to do it? So I truly appreciate
Mhm.
that. A very great comment. Let's talk about the magic wand.
Yeah.
Okay. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it at any issue or any problem that you see in the workplace today, What would that problem be and why did you choose it?
If I had a magic wand, I would help leaders specifically embrace a concept called paradoxical thinking. Paradoxical thinking is essentially holding two seemingly opposed ideas together at the same time in order to achieve something, go forward, make a decision, whatever that looks like. And it's actually really interesting because a lot of, I'm going to say natural paradoxical thinkers, people that can really work in gray, tend to see a lot of business success very quickly. And then will get really disillusioned and frustrated because they come up against this barrier with leadership teams. And it's this, I don't understand why everyone doesn't think like this. You have to piece that out and work through that as like a leader. I have this different way of thinking. But what I think is really interesting for leaders that makes me want to wave the magic wand is that I see again and again working with lots of clients in different sectors that there's really this idea of certain people hold certain roles. And some people are, I'm achieving revenue. And some people are, I'm just taking care of people. And those two things always seem to be at odds. We can either prioritize the person or we can prioritize big financial goals. And paradoxical thinking would say, or we do both. And that's really where the heart of what I do lies. Human centric leadership says that you can do both, that in fact, the way to make more money is by prioritizing the individual. There's a statistic that says highly engaged people or employees have 21% higher productivity, but also 21% higher profitability, which I think is so interesting because there's this direct connection between engaging the individual, whether that's meaningful work or a meaningful culture, with actually increasing your bottom line. There's also tons of statistics about burnout and mental overload and all these other things. I actually ran some numbers for the book that's coming out to really have a more in depth conversation about okay, so then what does the data say? What does the money actually say? And some of our preliminary findings are that if you take a 100% company, which is an average idea according to the sources we were using, or like a median company size, and then the average salary in America, which I also want to caveat is like private sector is inflated a little bit, but it's about 63K. And you factor in all the other ways that you lose employees, mental health, all the things we just said, mental health, burnout, productivity decrease because of whatever, PTO, et cetera. Every year, and then before I get to that, and then the cost to replace them. What is the HR cost? What is the executive cost? What is the interviews? What is the recruiting? All of it. Companies lose over $1 million every year just in this cycle. And that's not anything to do with growth. That's not, we've grown and we want to add more people to our company. And so there's an accrued cost, but that's just simply maintaining the numbers you currently have. And so if you think about what do I have to gain by doing this, or if you want to think about it as what do I have to lose, you could literally recoup $500,000 every year if you just were able to prioritize the well-being and development of your employees in a way where you retained 50% of your current workforce that turns over. I think that's a startling statistic for leaders to consider as they think about, okay, I have an option for how to get to these goals. Do I want to just not make it my responsibility to prioritize the health and well-being of the individual? Or do I want to say, this is the way we're going to get there by doing these things? And in the process, we'll create programs, we're going to create objectives and goals, and we're going to keep them to a standard, but we're going to never lose sight of the development of these individuals as part of a business and the mission statement value. And so that really to me is the magic wand is can you engage with two ideas that feel like they're at odds to believe that they are going to be working together to get you where you want to go.
My head is exploding. And because there's a couple of ways that I want to come back to that. First of all, about a year ago, I really started focusing on burnout.
Mhm.
And the question I was trying to answer for myself was what is the implication of leadership to burnout? How does leadership contribute to burnout or how does it prevent it? And so far, my ideas have developed in the direction that, and it goes into the number two thing that I talked about in the big three. People want to be involved in the decision-making processes of the organization. People want to matter and they want their work to matter. People search for a level of control and autonomy over their own lives. As I have a habit of saying, people want to be masters of their own fate. And when you take that away from people, when you sit at the top of the heap in an autocratic perspective on how leadership should be, and you take that away from people, in effect, what happens is is a critical factor in terms of causing burnout because people want to feel like they're in control. And when you're burned out, you feel like you have no control. I'm a victim here. I'm just getting hammered every day. There's nothing I can do. And oh, let me just mention that may not be work related. It may be a domestic issue. Maybe there's a sickness in the family, God forbid. There's something going on at home that just is overwhelming you. So one of the things, and again, I never intended this to happen. But 30 years ago, when I started my leadership model and started thinking about contribution, I said, let's give control to the people to have some level of self-determination in their own lives. So to me, that's a critical factor. The second thing is, and this is such an interesting mix, we live, and today we will continue to live, with bureaucratically defined organizations. Okay. The bureaucracy. Okay. It's not going. But it's become more of a boundary line. It's almost like watching tennis, okay? Or watching any game, a football game or a baseball game. There's lines and there's rules. That's the bureaucracy. Lines and rules. But every single day in any sport, you see some of the most creative things on playing fields. And to me, that is this paradoxical thinking. How can you understand that there are lines and rules, and normally now they're in place in case something goes wrong, in case there's some sort of that causes the structural people to get involved. Okay. But other than that, if you don't have that, it's let's show some creativity. Let's within the boundaries of the lines and the rules, there's a lot of things that can be done for creativity. So I absolutely understand and agree on this concept of paradoxical thinking, keeping two things that seem to be diametrically opposed
Mhm.
in play together. Okay. And doing that is not easy for a lot of people because they've been so channeled down one way, this way, or channeled down this way. But I agree with you. Doing those two
Yeah.
things or holding those two things together has to be done. And the reason is A, bureaucracy's not going away, and B, bureaucracy is terrible at adjusting to change, especially significant change. Hates change. It can stand moderate, small changes, but it hates big change. So any reflections on that, come back, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying. And it makes me think about something I tell my clients a lot, which is we are humans who go to work. We are not workers who go home. And so those lives, our work lives and our personal lives, are intrinsically bound. And no matter how much you try to separate those two things, they influence each other. What happens at work spills over into your personal life. If you're unhappy, if you're not motivated, if you're undervalued, that all translates into how you go home and vice versa. So you're dealing with big things. And so one of the keys that we talk about in the book and in my course is that we should be creating something that I have termed creative margin. We should be creating opportunities for our employees to rest and redefine what it means to be productive. Because what it meant to be productive in a previous life, if we think back in the 50s, I'm going to say, so that we take away all technology and kind of the early aughts of even franchising, because it was just a much harder thing to do before Wi-Fi and other like advances. If you were seen, then you were working. That was a management model. because that was literally true. If you were physically present in the office, you could hand someone a paper, or you could deliver a note, or you could pull a file. But that's not true anymore. But we still have so many things that we've established, even as far back as the Industrial Revolution, like 9 to 5. Like that was established. 5-day work week. That was established like centuries ago. And we still use that today as guiding forces of what does it mean to be productive. But those things truly are not, it's not that they're not applicable, but they're applicable in a completely different way. And I think about this thing I had seen recently, which was this article about AI, but it was really taking it from a psychological perspective angle. And they were saying the idea that's behind AI, the best case version of AI is that it automates out these menial tasks. Maybe you someday have an AI that answers your emails and writes new like coding and scripting, or do all these little things, right? Whatever, fill in the blank, whatever the thing is that you're like, "Ugh, I just have to do this 1,000 times a day, but it's not actually moving the needle forward in my job." Those are the things that give our brain rest. All of a sudden, we're asking our bodies to be on in the most intense way possible for 8 full hours. And it's impossible. We only get about 3 hours a day of actual good work. And so now we're expecting to take away all these things that are letting our brain rest and just be producers of strategic thinking for 8 hours. It's not going to ever work. And so, how do we redefine what it means to be productive and successful? And I think that part of that is by building in creative margin, areas where you can just let the brain make connections on its own. You can let the brain absorb and regenerate around sort of methodical, non-work related tasks. Like for me, one of my favorite ways is to literally paint something, paint a room, paint like a project, whatever it is, because I'm busy, I'm doing something, but my brain is just able to rest and think and regenerate. And so maybe that means something at work, like here's a passion project I have, something that I want to learn on my own. It helps stimulate, maybe it's working with a department that you partner with frequently just to learn someone else's role and just to be outside of your own scope of responsibility, right? So it doesn't have to be completely devoid of value for your job or for your organization. But I think that it's incredibly important to remember that we have a finite amount of resource as a human. And no matter how much we try to divorce it from work and home, or how much we try to say we can make everything the most productive possible, we just can't. And we have to decide then to change the fabric, the cornerstones of how we define this work life. And I think that's going to be a really challenging part of the next, I'm going to say 20 to 30 years of working culture.
Right. And the hybrid working environment now has shifted in many respects, a
Right.
lot of that. And that's why and one of the results of that is this idea that leadership is becoming an influence relationship. I had a guest on by the name of Ed Temple. Ed Temple's an MCC qualified coach, and we talk, and he has an AI partner called Enzo that he uses to help coaching. It actually asks you cool coaching questions if you're
Right.
up against the wall, so to speak, or thinking about something. But he said something that I thought was so incredibly intelligent. And he said, AI may wind up, as you say, doing 75 to 80% of the redundant things that we do every day. He said, which tells me that the 15 and 20% that's reserved for us humans is going to be even more important. Rachel, you have been a stunning guest. I really appreciate your time today here on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much. I wish you, your book, and everything you do in the future incredible success. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, John. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you.